Hello, Asia, and hello, world. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations is a regional body established in 1967 to promote regional cooperation and regional peace and stability. Coinciding with the 46th ASEAN Summit in May 2025, civil society organizations, human rights defenders, and pro-democracy advocates convened for the ASEAN peoples at ASEAN 2025, holding workshops and discussions to assess current issues and challenges and unite towards pushing for better recognition of rights and avenues for dialogue and cooperation in addressing these issues and challenges. Countries in the Southeast Asian region have been challenged with various issues related to upholding democratic norms and values and defending human rights of its people. The ASEAN peoples at ASEAN 2025 adopted a resolution defending democracy, political rights, and civic space in Southeast Asia, which expressed concern over the undermining of electoral processes, silencing of opposition voices, and the legitimization of civil society, as well as shrinking civic spaces, suppression of independent media, and surveillance of dissenting voices that further erode public trust and democratic legitimacy, among many others. The resolution declared a collective and unwavering commitment to actions towards advancing democracy, strengthening democratic ecosystems, reforming institutions, and promoting good governance, ensuring clean, free, and fair elections, protecting human rights and civil liberties, empowering youth and emerging leaders, and recognizing fundamental rights as shared global responsibility. It enumerated three main calls, namely 1, institutionalize democracy, human rights, and civic engagement as core tenets of ASEAN's future. 2, establish an ASEAN democracy dialogue for open deliberation among states, civil society, youth, parliamentarians, and independent experts. And 3, develop an ASEAN framework on democratic governance, electoral integrity, and rule of law that includes standards for free and fair elections, safeguard against authoritarian regression, and mechanisms for accountability, which affirm the role of citizen election observation, both domestic and international, as vital tool to enhance transparency and credibility. As ANFREL's The Election Observer podcast returns for its second season, in this episode, we'll discuss the emerging and pressing issues that undermine electoral integrity in Southeast Asia and the potential of ASEAN in ensuring electoral integrity in the region. I'm your host, John Antiquera, and we are live via ANFREL's Facebook and LinkedIn pages, as well as via ANFREL's YouTube channel. The episodes of the Election Observer podcasts can also be streamed later on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Joining us in this episode are Heroik Pratama, Program Officer of Perkumpulan, untuk, Pemilu, dan Demokrasi, or PERLUDEM from Indonesia. Alexa Yadao, Junior Program Officer at the Legal Network for Truthful Elections, or LENTE. And Yuyun Wahyuningrum, the Executive Director of the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights, or APHR. Hello, Heroik, Alexa, and Yuyun. Welcome to the the Election Observer podcast of ANFREL.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Yes, we'll go straight to my first question. So you, as I've mentioned, coinciding with the ASEAN Summit this year, there was the ASEAN Peoples at ASEAN 2025, which you participated in. Can you tell us what were your key takeaways from the event and what has been the reception of ASEAN to the declaration? Anyone can take the question. Who would like to go first?
I can.
Yes, please, Yuyun.
Well, of course, the event should be appreciated. It was well organized. I remember that if we link between ASEAN Peoples at ASEAN 2025 to the ASEAN Civil Society Conference, so it means what happened in May 2025 marked the 20th anniversary of engagement of civil society to ASEAN. And what struck me is that civil society continue to reaffirm people's voices across Southeast Asia, demanding a more democratic, accountable, and rights-respecting ASEAN. So that's noble ideas, and why we continue to repeat this kind of demand, because the demand is not yet there. So we want to have that kind of ASEAN that we want, such as right-based ASEAN. So this is and this kind of demand is based on life experiences, frustration, aspiration, observation, especially for those who are marginalized and excluded from the formal political processes. Regarding reception of ASEAN, I was not part of the group that met with ASEAN leaders. I think that the Malaysian organized number of civil society representative to go to see the official. I was not part of it. I just saw the picture in Facebook. But I hope they receive it positively, and it become the reflection of how people in Southeast Asia united, asking the same thing to make ASEAN is more democratic.
Heroic, how about you?
Yeah. I think, of course, one of the lesson learned that I participate on this ASEAN People Forum. As we know, in 2024, I think before 2024, since 2023, and also 2025, there is a super big elections in regions, right? Indonesia, Philippines, I think, and also before the Thai election. So inside this forum, we can share what of the challenges from each particular countries to protect democracy. As we know, election is one of the key of a democratic state. If there is no election, of course, there is no democratic state. But elections only, it not just only held periodically, but it should be protected by uh, by protecting the principle of electoral integrity. So on this ASEAN People Forum, we can learn each other. We can share how civil society group they defending the election integrity by doing advocating. For example, in my experience in Indonesia, how a civil society organization, especially PERLUDEM, advocate on the electoral rule to create more the clean, fair election environment, for example, something like that. It also happened with our friend from Bersih. They doing also advocating to create more democratic election rules, and also I think Alexa also in the Philippines. But not only advocating rule of law of the elections, but during the elections, we also conducting the voter educations. We also conducting election observations, and sometimes we feel the report to oversight or to the elections commission if there is the violations of the elections law. So under this forum, we can see the different perspective, but at the same time, we facing the similar problems in regions to protect the electoral integrity. One of the common issues I think that I can take away from this forum is the rule of state on ensuring the clean and fair environment for election to create more equal playing battlefield. But unfortunately, if we see based on the experience on the elections in the region, especially in Indonesia, based on also unfair observations during our presidential election in 2024, the state interference it's quite high. So I think it's one of the quite similar problem that I can learn from this forum. So we need to sit together to discuss how to defend the democratic with ensuring the clean and fair election.
Okay.
Final, Alexa.
Okay. Yeah, I guess before I provide just quick takeaways from the forum, I think it would be good also to discuss a bit how the forum was structured. So it wasn't actually democracy elections wasn't the only topic themes that were discussed in the ASEAN People's Forum. There were actually
Mhm.
18
Yes.
18 thematic clusters.
Mhm.
So basically, you have as related to elections such as corruption, for instance, but you also have themes or issues that are would not be explicitly related to elections and democracy, such as discrimination, religious
Mhm.
extremism, freedom of thought, etc. So there were a lot of
Yes.
issues that were raised during the ASEAN People's Forum that we that all of us attended. But I guess for the takeaways, I have two.
Mhm.
One is with all of these thematic clusters, I think the good takeaway, at least, or the positive feeling that I got is civil society is very vibrant, at least, or at least we have civil
Mhm.
society. We have a lot of attendees and organizations who attended, while there were some organizations, well, how the forum was structured was that, like-minded organizations working on similar topics were, grouped to discuss issues, but you will have a lot of civil society as much as there are a lot of issues to to
Yes.
address. But at the
Mhm.
same time also, and I think the second takeaway would be, I hope that there is more synthesis, I guess, of how these thematic issues intersect with each other, especially, for instance,
Mhm.
in elections. So, for
Yes.
instance, while democracy and political rights cluster is one cluster, there's also a cluster on corruption, for instance. But these two
Mhm.
issues, they intersect a lot of times, there are many interfaces, or for
Mhm.
instance, in terms of discrimination.
Yes.
So, and also I think the one, just in relation to that takeaway, is that there's always a nagging feeling of what now. So
Yes.
after 2 days of this, many discussions, long hours of discussion with our cluster, with like-minded organization, I
Mhm.
hope that there is something concrete beyond the
Yes.
consultations, something that concrete that can arise from this. So yeah, that's from my end.
Mhm. Very good takeaways, no? And of course, as part of civil society organizations observing elections, we of course believe that elections do not exist in a vacuum and that issues and challenges of electoral stakeholders are of course converging. And it's important to discuss these things and to talk about it with different sectors that are involved. So for my next question, no, as I've mentioned, at least that Heroik and Alexa are from organizations that monitor elections, and APHR being a member organization of parliamentarians who contest elections. No, you would probably have an idea. You would have an idea about emerging and pressing issues that undermine electoral integrity in the region. So, in your observation, in your monitoring of the situation in the region, what have been the emerging and pressing issues that undermine electoral integrity in Southeast Asia?
Heroik, you wanna go first? I volunteer Heroik.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe I will start with the maybe as we know there is some new release from the Electoral Integrity Project, yeah, by
Mhm.
Pipa Norris. One of if we see the region is very declining the score of electoral integrity in region, in
Mhm.
particular in my countries. If we see since 2019 elections, after the first simultaneous elections in Indonesia, maybe as the information, Indonesia conducting the first held simultaneous election between the presidential elections and legislative election in
Mhm.
2019, and the second time in 2024. But since 2019, based on the electoral integrity results, there is a
Mhm.
declining score for Indonesia. In
Mhm.
2024, overall the electoral integrity declined from 66 to 47 in Indonesia.
Wow.
So this report also show the funding of unfair election observation, a lot of the rule of many politics in Indonesians contestation, for example, and also the state abuse state resorts during the election process that make our score of electoral integrity is declining. But I think the situation after I joined in the ASEAN People Forum, I heard from the Alexa and also from the other peoples. We facing similar problems during to protect electoral integrity. One is the rule of state. They should be provide more clean, fair election environment to create more equal treatment for any political party participant to candidate during the contestations. But in fact, sometimes, especially the country who the incumbents run again for the second term, for example, they try to use the infrastructure, the resource to gain most votes during the election. For example, during they use the bureaucracy, for example, or the state budget for gaining the most vote. This also happen, I think, it's not only in Indonesia but also in region. One of the challenges, and the second issues, I think, how to protect the electoral integrity, and it also the common issues is ensuring the independency of the elections commissions. It's I think it's the classic problem, yeah, in regions, how to make sure and ensure the peoples who sit as the commissioners and in the elections, they uh, the independence, impartials, not part of any political party. Even though I think based on the elections or regulations in region, uh, one of the requirement for to be the members of the election commission is not part of the members of political party. But in fact, the relations between the election commission during the election, sometimes they forget about the principle of the independence. I would like to give one example in Indonesia regarding the party registrations stages in Indonesia. We fight. We There is a political party not eligible to run as the political party's participant, but uh, there is an issue. The elections commission tried to allow them to be part of the political party registrations. Of course, it's against the law. And also about the woman candidacy quota, because since 2004 Indonesia adopt 30% women candidate, but in 2024 there is the revisions on the elections commission's regulation that decreasing the number of 30% of number of women on the list. Of course, it's not appropriate with the elections law. So the independency of the election commission, I think, one of the crucial issue that I think we should. And the last part, I think, based on our lesson learned from sharing with the ASEAN People Group on democratic issue to protect the electoral integrity, is how to ensure we can make some more big coalition, every civil society organization, not only civil society who work on the election issues, but also civil society on environment group, for example, also human rights and so on. We need to cooperate together to create more voter educations to ensure and uh, if there is a violations, we can feel the report to the authority, something like that. So the election observations not only for the civil society who work on election issue, but I think we need to more engage with the other civil society organization, because the election issue is the intersection issues, the impact also not only for the civil society group, civil society who focus on election, but also for the other issue. I think that's it, John.
Okay. Can we hear from Yuyun first before Alexa? Alexa, you're going to be the last one to answer, no?
Okay.
No, so we'll go now because you work on the issue,
Yes.
Alexa.
Oh, okay.
Alexa, go ahead.
All
Yes.
right. Okay. Well, so the question was pressing and emerging. I think for pressing issues, At least for Southeast Asian states who are still able to conduct elections because we have neighboring countries who are can't conduct, or at least the credibility of elections are put into question if they ever conduct one. But at least for those who have for Southeast Asian states, for instance, Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, for instance. I think the pressing issue would be three that are common among these countries. Political corruption is one, specifically misuse of state resources. And this issue is actually it's an issue that goes beyond election period, and also happens, across the electoral cycle, which has impacts, of course, for elections and beyond and governance. Second would be declining electoral competitiveness. I think we should also share this with Indonesia, for instance, and other neighboring countries as well. How we have sort of this sense that yes, we're conducting elections, we're conducting them orderly, we have generally peaceful elections, but do we have are we able to do we in our ballots, are we able to have candidates that would really give true meaning to what a democratic country would be like? Because elections just one of the barometers for democracy. If you have candidates who are coming from the same families, coming from the same elite groups, do you have true democracy? And then the second, I think, would be the third would be accountability gaps. Because in every election you have rules governing these elections, mechanisms and institutions at play to sort of regulate the conduct of elections and the conduct of parties and candidates. And sometimes, for instance, in the Philippines, we have still same election offenses and election issues that we see every election cycle, and always the conversation is how many were held accountable, what are the in terms of these issues, and actually erring candidates, for instance, those who violate laws blatantly, and how our election legal frameworks can't catch up, or at least can't respond effectively. So all of these, I think, they impact not only electoral integrity, but also public's perception of the credibility of elections. Yeah. So, but I think, but in terms of emerging, I think there would also be a consensus of how well we've all gone through the problem of digital technologies impacting elections. So you have disinformation, foreign influence, foreign led disinformation campaigns. But there's also sort of this how we're preparing about how artificial intelligence would also be impacting our elections. We haven't seen it yet, how we sort of especially during the super election year, in the Philippines, we were sort of, at least our election management body took sort of a proactive stance in terms of responding, or proactive stance in terms of how it would what can it do in terms of artificial intelligence. And thankfully we haven't seen what we have thought worse of how it would be, it would dominate, and it would increase, worsen actually the problem of election disinformation. We haven't seen it yet, but we can't rest as we've seen in previous. I think that would also be an emerging issue still. And I was browsing through the document that was at least the ASEAN 2045, and there was also, it was already recognized that there at ASEAN should be more proactive in terms of leveraging, as well as regulating artificial intelligence and how it and its impacts in all facets of society. So I think that would be from my end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just to add what has been mentioned, APHR sent a delegation to the election in Philippines, and also observing number of elections in different countries, and we saw a number of similar issues around the region. The increase of use misinformation, and also the judicial prosecution and legal engineering to politicians, and this becoming our main concern especially if there are female politicians, then it become harsher. And shrinking civic space has been felt very much when I was in Manila, because we were only in Manila and Quezon City during the election. I asked around, is there any coalition of civil society cross issues like Heroik mentioned? Apparently, there has been a number of reluctant of those who are not working in election to observe the election, as if there's a different interest, there is a gap between election and their issues. When I said, well, election really impact our life, our work, before election, during election, and after election. So, but there is a sense of reluctance. That is why, and this is not only in the Philippines; it's also in Indonesia, in different countries in Southeast Asia. And I think that's what Heroic suggestion on having a coalition across issues in civil society is very, very important.
Okay. I think in observing elections in the region, we see similarities in terms of the issues that these countries experience. No, so the importance and the role possibly of organizations, of bodies, regional bodies such as ASEAN could be an important and key aspect in providing solutions, possibly dialogue, and to talk about these issues. No, so I wanted to ask, how can ASEAN address these issues, and what could be ASEAN's role in ensuring electoral integrity in Southeast Asia? Maybe Alexa, we go with you first now.
Okay. Mm, well, I guess if we're talking of ASEAN as the regional body, the formal institution, organization, I guess it has it has its limitations in terms of what it can do in terms of electoral integrity, because for one, its founding principle and core principle is non-interference, and it's also state-based consensus-driven regional organization. So, and elections are very like, I mean, they have impacts like that can reverberate to other countries, but it's essentially a domestic matter, which is, it might be difficult for ASEAN to actually directly do something on the elections of its member states. So I think that's an inherent limiting principle if we're talking about ASEAN, the regional body. And but what can it do, right? Because still, it's the foremost regional organization representing Southeast Asian nations. Think at the end of the day, if ASEAN really do want to do something, or at least civil society organizations like us should pressure its leaders, it's, our own leaders, if we really do want something to happen on improving electoral integrity in Southeast Asia, because real reform, real action can only happen if states themselves actually do decide to prioritize electoral integrity as part of regional cooperation. So I mean, we have mechanisms such as track 1.5 or track 2 dialogues that would, bring together both government and non-government organizations to consult, to have dialogue. But at the end of the day, these mechanisms can only at least create soft norms or frameworks that can be a guide for organizations, and if not actually have the teeth, the enforcement, can't really enforce anything if you really don't want an action. So I think that's a limiting principle, and that's why I think, I guess, it's also the position of Lente during the democracy and political rights cluster. Really, though, if we want something, if we want reforms, we really have to work together. Insert ourselves in formal conversations or formal is mechanisms or formal institutions, so we could influence decision makers and policy leaders, and hopefully, have it up the chain to regional dialogues such as ASEAN. So a bit negative for me in terms of what ASEAN can do in electoral integrity. Maybe others can have a
So
more
how about
positive
Heroik? Yes.
view.
Yeah, I think I
Heroik,
have
would you be able to offer something positive, as Alexa said?
yeah, I think on the formal or in state actor, of course, the ASEAN cannot do more, yeah, because like there is a articles that not interference to the domestic democracies. But as informal ways, especially on civil societies groups, of course, we can create more big coalitions in the region to protect democracy in our region and also to improve our electoral integrity. So there is so many activity that we can do for doing this big coalition. For example, to protect the legal framework suitable with the principle or basic principle with electoral integrity, mostly country civil society organizations they advocating with the parliaments like Alexa share on the ASEAN Forum, how LENTE engage with the MPs and also how PERLUDEM engage with the MPs. But on the other ways, we can learn the other civil society organization, the success story of civil society organization to advocate the legal framework on the election, for example. In Indonesia, for example, based on our experience, Perludem not only advocating during the revisions of the elections law in the parliaments, but also we come to the court, the constitutional court. I think it's one of the promising way, yeah, for civil society organizations to advocate the rule of law on the elections, especially on democratic principles in the election legal framework. Nowadays, for example, we also win in the constitutional court. The constitutional court granted our judicial review to divide the simultaneous elections on national level and the local levels. So since 2014, I think we was feel more than 26 judicial review to the Constitutional Court. So I think it's one of the good political opportunity for civil society organizations to influence the decisions making process if in the parliament. Even though there is a different approach to sit together on to create dialogue with the state actor for the MPs. So we can learn each other between civil society organizations to advocate the rule of law, for example. And also one of the important things I think what we can do in ASEAN as a civil society group is the solidarities. If there is something happen, if there is a problem on the election process, for example, so we can create the solidarities for each country for civil society group to protect the democratic and also election integrities for the country who facing problems during the election process, for example. And of course, we can join the election observations. UNFREL has a significant roles, I think, to as a hub, as a place for civil society group to fight together to ensure the electoral integrity it's happened during the election process. I think that's all from my side.
The way I see ASEAN is not from perspective of ASEAN telling countries on what to do, because then immediately you face with the principle of non-interference. The way I see ASEAN is a platform as a platform for regional cooperation. So this regional organization will be able to provide a platform for National Commission on Election, for instance, to coming together. So they can learn each other, they can share experiences, they can build their own standard in terms of electoral integrity. So it is not to. So it is not that the body, because who in ASEAN can tell other countries doing that? Each country has a different context. So that is why if I don't want ASEAN come to my country saying you are doing wrong. No,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
because that exactly the violation of non-interference principle.
Non-interference. Yes.
ASEAN doesn't have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
ASEAN can bring all actors together and come up with a platform sharing of information, especially with the National Election of Commission. There are so many experiences already. So, for instance, now in ASEAN level, there is like a network of forum or of ombudsman. Not all countries have ombudsman, so they come together only the countries that have ombudsman.
Mm-hmm.
The other example is the body victims and witness protection body. So not all countries have this body, but now already all countries have this specific body, but in different characteristic. For instance, Indonesia is independent body, but for other countries it's under Ministry of uh, Interior, under police, but they come together, agree. They don't tell each other what is right and what is wrong. They share
Yes.
information.
Mm-hmm.
And then another coalition or forum is National Commission on a Commission on Corruption.
Mm-hmm.
They come together, meet every year. They learn each other, and they also come up with the cooperation of arresting the perpetrators. So these can be done at the ASEAN level.
Mm-hmm.
If we see ASEAN as a platform for cooperation, for regional collaboration. Similarly,
Mm-hmm.
if this
Yes.
if this idea to be realized, the National Commission will come together. Even when I was in the Philippines, I saw the
Mm-hmm.
electoral the what is this? Because you have a different machine, yeah, for election. Indonesia doesn't have that, and Indonesia doesn't want to go to digital way of doing election.
Mm-hmm.
But Philippine Comelec can share the experiences. This is what we have
Yes.
experienced in the in years, and it is up to the country if
Mm-hmm.
they want to follow. There are experiences. We are not lack of experiences.
Yes.
We have so many experiences that
Mm-hmm.
this election of commissions can learn to each other and can
Yes.
contextualize it into their own system, and then
Mm-hmm.
they can expand a little bit to civil society. So they can bring in civil society
Mm-hmm.
to be able to talk about electoral integrity together
Mm-hmm.
between the official, between the state organ and the civil society. So that kind of ASEAN cooperation that we can do in relation to promote or to improve the standard in relation to electoral integrity in the region.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I was also going to say that it's also not just about scrutiny and criticism, but it's also about being able to share best practices in terms of upholding electoral integrity. I just wanted to follow up with you, Yuyun, because I know you were the representative of Indonesia to the intergovernmental um, ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. Uh, and because you've mentioned that there are already platforms for regional cooperation in ASEAN, particularly on victims of witness protection body, and of course, the Commission on Human Rights, the IHR, is also such body of cooperation. So I wanted to ask, like, what could we learn from that platform that we can apply into forming a regional platform for upholding electoral integrity in Southeast Asia?
First, we need to bring the like-minded individual from different countries coming together in the workshop. So this is the practice so far. When I approached the ombudsman forum, the Victim and Witness Protection Forum. So first they come together a regional workshop, and then they keep sharing among themselves, and they appreciate this kind of forum of allowing everyone to share without judging, and then they agree to come up with the forum. The name can be forum, network, or whatever name agreed by the participants. And then after that, they come up with the statute, and then they registered. Some people approach me on how to register this kind of organization. They can actually become the entity of ASEAN, in which they will be able to engage whenever ASEAN has event, and they might be also recognized. There is a audit, national audit bodies already coming together as a network, and already recognized by ASEAN. But ICHR is different. ICHR is not organization that established in that path. ICHR, ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission Human Rights, was established by Article 14 of the ASEAN Charter as the human rights phase of the regional organization named ASEAN. The one that I give the example so far is that these bodies already there. What they need to do is coming together as regional,
Yes.
because there is no specific um, provision in ASEAN Charter mention about uh, the establishment of new body of the regional network of National Commission on Election, for instance. There is no such a thing. The only body that established by charter is the ICHR, the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. The charter mentioned about ASEAN Human Rights Body, and then the name become ASEAN Human Rights, ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. But charter mention about adherent to human rights, democracy, rule of law, and good governance, which actually the election can be under democracy and good governance. So charter actually provides number of reference point that we can use for this commission, all commission coming together. The problem is usually not all countries in ASEAN have national commission on election. Like Brunei Darussalam, I'm not sure whether it has a commission this, but the experiences so far, they come together as coalition of willing, those who want to come together, and then but they keep the membership open until countries are ready to establish their own and join the forum.
Okay. So for my next question, no, for civil society organizations who want to engage with ASEAN, how are there existing mechanisms for them to engage and talk to ASEAN as a regional body to report issues or seek redress of grievances, particularly related to elections and election integrity? Are there existing mechanisms?
None. Well,
None.
it's more thematic. So, for instance, if it's human rights, they can go to Human Rights Commission, ICHR. Other bodies may open. I think social cultural bodies are quite open to meet with civil society and to receive some suggestions, like ACWC, the ASEAN Commission on Women and Children, quite open to engage with women organization, child rights organization. So this is something that I would like to also criticize ASEAN. So ASEAN just adopted the ASEAN Vision 2045.
Yes.
This is the third blueprint because we have the two before. But you can see from the first blueprint, second blueprint, and then now the current blueprint, the reference to democracy decrease until none. No mention now. So because in the first blueprint there was a reference, the mention on share experiences, build capacity for official on democracy, sharing information about democracy system and so on and so forth. And then the second blueprint becoming less. And then now it has the word democracy mentioned as the aspiration, but no action point, because blueprint basically equal to work plan. So you have vision on democracy, but you don't have the action point. So it means by 2045, democracy remain a vision, not something that uh, implement together, or something. It's still the
Yes.
aspiration. So you can see in the next 20 years, which is very um, that is why I in the beginning I mentioned that the voices of civil society remaining very important, and repetitively asking about democratizing ASEAN, because that particular call was not necessarily achieved, or not necessarily taken into consideration seriously. So I'm actually quite worried. But of course, as civil society, we need to push back. We need to address this issue. Regardless, there is less mention about democracy action point in the blueprint. We should be able to find ways to create path within the blueprint, because the reference document that we should respect the most is ASEAN Charter. ASEAN Charter mentioned about democracy. Why the plan of action on put democracy only as aspiration and not action point? So perhaps this require a better discussion among civil society in the region, how we address this, how we find ways to this regional arrangement of government, governance, and system to realize democracy as mentioned in charter into the breadth of this regionalism. So our regionalism is more economic, politic, social, but not necessarily the system of democracy. Not yet. Then we are talking about election integrity, electoral integrity. So even the chapeau, the umbrella for the electoral integrity is not there. How we can push the norms and standard on electoral integrity in ASEAN.
I guess for everyone as well, no. For my next question, because we're talking about democracy and elections in Southeast Asia, and of course we cannot ignore that there is one particular. Of course, there are other issues as well in other countries, but particularly about elections and the situation in Myanmar. We have an episode coming up about that would talk about more about the situation in Myanmar. But I wanted to just ask briefly and hopefully talk about this for this one, because we cannot ignore the fact that um, there is an ongoing struggle in the country. In as we if we can recall, in 2021, the military staged a coup that disregarded the results of the 2020 general election, and they have made pronouncements of conducting an election by the end of the year. So I know initially ASEAN responded with a 5-point consensus, but would civil society organizations have criticized it as being ineffective. So I wanted to ask, how can ASEAN better address the situation in Myanmar? With, as you've mentioned earlier, you know, that not even in the blueprint is democracy mentioned. So how can ASEAN as a regional body respond to the situation there? It's a very dire situation, and we cannot ignore what is happening there. So that's my question. Anyone can respond.
Alexa, you
Oh,
go first.
it's a difficult question. Well, I guess I would just be parroting what I've heard so far. So I think there's a debate, right? At least if are we going to um legit by recognizing that there will be elections and sending observation teams or etc. Are we're basically legitimizing the conduct of elections when in fact the body or the government that's gonna implement the elections, its legitimacy is put into question ever since the coup happened in 2021. But at the same time, um obviously ASEAN as the regional body, or our leaders have, as you've mentioned, John, their stance towards the Myanmar issue over the years, over the past 4 years, have been heavily criticized for basically just not doing anything at all concrete to improve the situation. So obviously we can't rely on our leaders to do something concrete. So this is where civil society comes in, especially in these situations where obviously our states or leaders can't do anything. And this is the importance of civil society organizations, but also at what cost, at the risk of what. So I'm sorry, I don't have an answer, but I guess that would be the that's a current conversation right now, and I look forward to learning more from the next episodes on what can we actually do as civil society when in the past 4 years we haven't seen any progress to alleviate the situation in Myanmar. Again, sorry for the negative attitude towards it.
Heroic.
Yeah, I think yeah. Um, what we can do as the civil society, yeah, of course, about the we can like Alexa mentions, because as the state actor, they maybe can influence. So our civil society group, for example, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, in Indonesia, they create a joining solidarity for Myanmar, and also there is a, if I'm not mistaken, there is a legal act in Indonesia to create with the Myanmar. If I'm not mistaken, yeah, but there is some human rights civil society groups in Indonesia. They try to doing something. Uh, to protect the human rights issues in the Myanmar and also the democratic process in Myanmar. But yeah, of course, we can push our government, yeah, to also joining the solidarity of the Myanmar to, yeah, we hope for the future. But I think I was surprised. I just know for Mbak Yuyun mentioned related with the democratic term on the ASEAN. So you can imagine the democracy is not only the concept, right? It should be implemented. So if this happen in for the next 20 years, so we just only can hurt the democracy inside the class, not on the implementations, not on how public participate on the elections, not how public give some aspirations during the decision making process for the government, and how public observe the implementations of the policy of the government. So I think it's also one of our homework as a civil society group to push and to joining to create more big coalitions to work together to protect our democracy in region, especially to institutionalize the value and the norm of democratic principles inside the ASEAN Charter.
Yeah, so today is the 58th ASEAN Ministerial Meeting in Kuala Lumpur. So I'm sure they, they include this kind of discussion on the election in Myanmar into their agenda. The retreat in February of ASEAN foreign ministers, the chair of ASEAN Malaysia foreign minister said election is not the priority as of now. Peace is. So that's actually a diplomatic way to say that we disagree with your plan of election. So, but countries are divided in ASEAN, as you can see in the newspapers. Thailand is just wait and see. Cambodia ready to send the election observer. Singapore and Malaysia said the same thing. This is not our priority. So please prioritize peace. Um, when we went to Mesot and Chiang Mai, civil society and people Myanmar people living in the border also worried about the election if it is going to happen. They expressed the disagreement about the election because the if junta do want to organize the election, they don't have mandate to do that. They grab the power unconstitutionally, so they don't have the mandate to conduct election. That one, the organizer. The second, election cannot be happen when you see this killing every day and people got very worried about the situation. So we are not going to have a fair and a credible election when you are in this kind of situation. And then we also met with civil society. There's a network of civil society, young people against election. It's just when we ask, how if the election happened anyway? Because some of the politicians also divided from different political parties based on ethnic. Some politicians said this is the only way to change the regime, but the rest said no. The procedures is not proper, so we cannot even start the election. So there are different voices, and I think we echo that kind of concerns from outside because you are outsider, and that's also what many member states express, uh, that it is impossible to organize to have the election in this kind of situation. But China supported already expressed the interest to support the election. Uh, so that's some kind of worry that are mingle around people. So perhaps the member states need to lobby China not to support this, or lobby India not to support this. Let's prioritize peace. Let's realize 5-point consensus, cessation of violence first, and then dialogue, and then having interim government at the moment, so this can be done, and then people will have enough power and consent to come to election to establish to form their own government as they wish. But yeah, so I'm actually waiting to read the joint communique of today's ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting. Um, if they like what I learned from the previous retreat of AMM in February, the reference of election is not in the document, but the foreign minister said during the press conference. It means it was discussed but failed to be included because no consensus. So he has to say, So let's see how the dynamic. But I hope uh, um, member states mature enough to reject and provide alternatives on election. And yeah, I think one of them is also because as you know, Myanmar rejected the application of Timor Leste, so this is another dynamic inside ASEAN that might dilute the discussion, because when we talk about Myanmar, we talk about coup election, and now Myanmar put another bomb, saying we against the the admission of Timor-Leste in the next summit. So then the topic is diluted, not only about
Yeah.
coup election, but also about this agreement. So that's how I really, really want to see the joint communique of this ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting.
I guess we'll also be monitoring the developments of that, no? And as I've mentioned, we will have an upcoming episode about this to discuss more about the situation in Myanmar. So we're down to our last two questions, no? So please bear with me. I know we've reached the 1 hour mark already, but we're just down to our last two questions. My next question is one of the main calls of the ASEAN peoples at ASEAN 2025 declaration gave emphasis to the affirmation of the role of citizen election observation and pushing to develop an ASEAN framework on democratic governance, electoral integrity, and rule of law. So my question is, why is it important to affirm the role of citizen election observation as, I would quote, no, a vital tool to enhance transparency and credibility of elections? Maybe we hear from the election observer first. Heroik.
Yeah, yeah, of course. The citizen election observation is one of the main uh, agenda, I think, for ASEAN to especially to more open for citizens and also civil society group to observe the elections. Because if we see the, I'm sorry, if too noisy. Uh, yeah, because as we know, one of the basic principle of the electoral integrity is the transparencies and also the oversight. So the role of the civil society group to observe elections, I think one of should be a rise for every countries in ASEAN to participate, because if we see one of the benefit of the election oversight process is the legitimations of the elections, right? So if there is some observation missions like unfair doing in our country, for example, in Indonesia, based on your assessment, there is I think there is a lot of election violations rights during the election process in Indonesia. But when the winners of the election has announced by the elections commissions, the candidate participants and the political participant, they said there is no violence. So the election observation, one of the evidence base, I think, to assess the quality of the election process for each country, not only come from the elections commissions, not from the political party participants or candidates, not for the government. So the independencies of the election oversight result, I think, is one of the important parts. So that's why the opportunity every country, I think, should be open if there is the plan of or the implementations of the election observation for the civil society group like UNFREL to observe the elections in ASEAN country.
Alexa.
Um, well, I guess at this point, since you already explained thoroughly how democracy remains as an aspiration, not even like a strategic goal or an objective to be achieved. Like now more than ever, it's the time to really affirm. And one of the concrete ways to make democracy not only like an aspiration is its concrete ways is to this one to affirm the importance of not only elections but even very very specifically the importance of citizen election observation. So again, elections just one of the many facets of democracy, and as mentioned by Heroik, citizen election observation is one of the strongest safeguards that you can have against electoral fraud, electoral manipulation, even disenfranchisement of vulnerable sectors. So, as mentioned again by Heroik, it's an evidence based assessment of of how we can improve our elections, and then consequently, of course, our democracy. But also at the same time, and I guess I think this is something that our governments, our leaders should realize also, that they really have a good incentive in terms of ensuring that elections are transparent and accountable by allowing citizen election observation. They have an incentive to do so because, again, as mentioned by Heroik, it gives legitimacy to elections, thus their election into office. So yeah, well, there are many issues also in terms of citizen election observation. I know there are current already existing mechanisms or institutions in many Southeast Asian countries that would allow observers. That's one, but then the access of observers or etc. There are host of issues, but I think it's as mentioned by you, if you want an action point, an action in terms of working towards democracy, and then this would be affirming the importance of citizen election observation is a good start. And again, since we don't see it anywhere in formal documents, civil society, not only election observation groups like PERLUDEM and LENTE, but also other civil society groups also have a lot to play in terms of a role to play in terms of advocating for this one.
I just would like to add one more thing from what already mentioned. One of the human rights in civil political rights include the right to participate in forming government. So forming government can mean elected and to be elect and to be elected, and also to participate in the process of the election itself. Uh, in ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, it mentioned in Universal Declaration of Human Rights, also in civil covenant, international covenant on civil political rights, also mentioned. So this is basically international law. Well, I just would like to give this a caveat. In ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, there is a comma according to national law. But anyway, the basic rights of individual has right to participate in forming government is mentioned there. So this right can be elaborated further. I haven't checked whether the Committee on Human Rights, the Committee of the Civil Political Rights, has explored this particular rights uh, uh, um, on the interpretation, because the committee role is to provide interpretation of certain article in the convention. Again, I need to check whether the committee has interpret this particular article. But this is one of the reference point to provide the reference for citizen observation. And if we look at it from the perspective of principle of democracy, which inclusivity, participation, accountability, as mentioned earlier, is part of it. So the activities in relation to election observation actually to serve this kind of principle of human rights. So, and this is also the area in which human rights and democracy come into the nexus, uh, um, that the rights of individual to participate in the democratic election. At the same time, democracy itself is a system, is a process, and so many events under it. So for me, from the perspective of human rights, it's part of it. But again, we need to provide uh, wider or better explanation based on this particular article. I'm so sorry, I cannot remember the number of the article, but it's mentioned in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, International Covenant on Civil Political Rights, as well as in the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration.
Yes. Okay. So for my last question, no, I know we have been talking about during the discussion the ASEAN blueprint. No, so during the 2025 ASEAN Summit in Malaysia, ASEAN adopted the ASEAN Community Vision 2045. I quote, resilient, innovative, dynamic, and people-centered ASEAN. And strategic plans comprising, of course, the blueprint, ASEAN 2045, our shared future. It succeeds the ASEAN 2025 Forging Ahead Together blueprint, which was adopted in Kuala Lumpur 10 years ago in 2015. As the Philippines prepares to host the next ASEAN Summit, what should be its legacy, its contribution, or central theme in advancing the ASEAN 2045 vision? I also wanted to add, I know we didn't add this, but just from the discussion, no, is there a possibility to add an action point in terms of democracy, improving democracy in that vision? Because as you've mentioned, there is no action point. So is there still a possibility to incorporate an action point?
No, not
No.
incorporating, but expanding or giving interpretation on the existing action point.
Uh-huh.
Um, on paper, you can search. There is only democracy without action point, but you can find, if you can find similar word, similar term that allow us to establish argument or action point as elaboration, as interpretation of that action point, possible. So it is us to tell our government, Philippines government, the next year where how this particular action point need to be implemented. That's we can enter that part, because this Vision 2045 has been discussed for 5 years, since 2022 until now. So it's a long process. Because it was a long process, it involved a lot of discussion, consensus, many things there. So sometimes when we involve consensus, the lower denominator always win, because we are coming from different contexts in the region. So now it's done, but it is not done yet in terms of how implementing it, because it is done on what. Now the question is how. So this is the entry point on how we can translate a certain action point to fit with our agenda.
Heroik and Alexa.
Yeah, I guess I'll go. I'll go next. Well, I'm the only Filipino here, so the chairship carries I think at least in terms of influencing priorities, um, it carries a great deal. So, and the as Philippines chairship of the ASEAN Summit next year would be the first year after the ASEAN 2045 vision was launched. So it's important. It's important. I was looking at statements from our president after he signed the 2045 vision few months ago, and it basically says that the Philippines, through our current president, is committed to making ASEAN an economic powerhouse with a people-centered future. So I think that sets the tone in terms of the priorities of the Philippines for its chairmanship next year. But well, I guess at least it included the people-centered future, right?
Yes.
And so, as mentioned by Yuyun a while ago, how do we leverage existing measures that are already included in the blueprint, and be creative, work around in terms of interpretation. And also was looking at the at news reports, as well as official communication posts by our ministries here in the Philippines. And supposedly the as part of its vision, there as part of its priorities, one would be creating an inclusive, participatory, and a collaborative community. So, as Well, I think there's that hope in terms of how leveraging it to fit, as you mentioned, our agenda of pushing for
Yes.
democratic and political rights, especially of how in terms of the level of priority it was afforded in the blueprint also. But yeah, and I think also Antral is preparing to also host the electoral election stakeholders forum next year in the same year.
Yes.
I'm so sorry if John, please pagalitan mo ako if I
No,
shouldn't
no,
have
no.
said that.
This has been announced. So
Yes, it's
yes.
been announced, right? So I think that would be a good timing also. I think that it would the ASEAN election stakeholders forum will be conducted ahead of the summit activities, or at least the opening of the summit next year. So I think that would be
Yes.
a good platform to
Mm.
put the agenda in terms of not only elections and electoral integrity, but also democracy and political rights
Yes.
in the conversation, in the discourse
Mm.
leading to the ASEAN Summit. So that, as mentioned by Yuyun, it does not remain as an aspiration, but we can
Mm.
do something, even small wins or small reforms that we can do in terms of that theme. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, of course, we want ASEAN, like by you mentioned, as the platform, not only for the state actors, but also for the peoples and also for the civil society group. And I would like rise again about the democratics. It's not only a concept, yeah. I think it's not only a norm, but I think it's a value. It should be implemented. So we
Mm.
hope for the upcoming ASEAN in 2025, hosted by the Philippines. Yeah, we can more rise on democratic issues, especially on
Mm.
the protecting electoral integrities, because based on our lesson learned on the super elections in regions, so we can learn each other. So I think I'm agree what Mbak you mentioned. There is even though if I'm not mistake, ASEAN Stakeholder Electoral Forum hosted by ANPEL also put not only civil society, right, but also the elections commissions member to talk and to discuss together to how to protect the electoral integrity. So I think so the ASEAN forum, I think it should be intersections actors, yeah, not
Yes.
only for the president or the minister, but also for the state actor who responsible on conducting the elections process, and also give more opportunity for civil society group to share our aspirations, share our
Mm.
insight regarding to protect our democratic in regions.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I
So
have two
I think
suggestions.
yes, please.
I have two suggestions for Philippines.
Yes, yes, please. We would like to
So,
hear it.
since Philippines just finished the election,
Mm.
I think the election in Philippines will provide a lot of ideas for the for the region,
Yes.
regardless all the criticism, because all system are being criticized everywhere in the world.
Mm.
Uh, so maybe we can suggest to COMELEC to host a regional conference on electoral integrity in Southeast Asia. Because we need one country to champion, we need one country to initiate. Of course,
Yes.
toward this kind of forum, we still have 6 months, no? We need to
Yes.
voice, we need to influence Comelec to take this kind of leadership role.
Mm.
Once
Mm.
they will talk to different national commission on election in the country, because to be able
Yes.
to bring them together, they have to have this personal approach, talking to one by one, and then so they come with, because this is a characteristic of government. They talk first, and then sending the invitation in person, and then
Yes.
they come to the regional conference. So if Comelec agree to take this leadership, um, because very often my experience, when the country only think about what they can do during their chairship time, it's already late,
Mm.
because it
Mm.
require a lot of lobby. if
Yes.
COMELEC can start thinking about that now, it gives them enough time to lobby internally inside COMELEC, internally in the country with relevant institutions, and then they go outside, meaning approach Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, others that have commission on election, and then they come to the meeting, maybe the first uh, uh, quarter of the year, 2026. But also when civil society, for instance, when UNFREL approach COMELEC, UNFREL also can say two options. One, have civil society session or having side event. I prefer to be a civil society session to be part of the conference, not side event, because side event means it is not important. No? So having, because when civil society have sessions in the conference, not only civil society can attend, government can also attend.
Yes.
So there will be exchange of views and ideas and so on and so forth. So in the building of idea of coming up with kind of hopefully a forum of national commission of election, civil society already part of the building of the idea. So that's one. So if Unfurl can take this leadership to go to Comelec or also with Lente to talk to Comelec what possible initiative Comelec can do during the chairship of Philippines 2026, that would be good, no, as an idea. Second, if the president of Philippines said about economic powerhouse and people-centered, that actually provide um, a lot of space for us to argue that electoral integrity is very important, because we cannot establish economic powerhouse without having a trust. And how to create a trust, how to obtain trust is through electoral integrity. Because how come government can be trusted without the system that is integrity? So the sequence is actually good if it is really about the aim of Philippines chairship is to establish ASEAN as economic powerhouse. Then we can say to be able to arrive this level, we need trust. And trust, one of the ways to obtain trust is by having electoral integrity. So there, the agenda of electoral integrity may be appreciated, and that's also can be a way of COMELEC come into to contribute to the realization of the goal of Philippines' goal being the ASEAN chair.
Okay. I do have a quick response to your first suggestion. No? As Alexa has said, the Asian ANFREL is hosting the Asian Electoral Stakeholder Forum next year, the seventh installation of AESF, which is co-hosted um, by the Commission on Elections. So there will be a platform for civil society organizations and election management bodies in Asia to convene and discuss electoral issues and challenges, as well as share best practices. So that's a good suggestion, because there will be one just in time for the hosting of the Philippines of the being the chairman of the ASEAN next year. So it's a good opportunity. So I guess our work is cut out for us as well, no? So thank you for joining us today, Yuyun, Alexa, and Heroik. It has been a very interesting discussion. I know we said the episode is about an hour and we've lasted for more than an hour, but thank you for all the insights that you've provided for today. I would have to remove you from the stream to close the show, but thank you very much again for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
And yes, that has been the Election Observer podcast episode on the emerging and pressing issues that undermine electoral integrity in Southeast Asia and the potential role of ASEAN in ensuring electoral integrity in the region. Get the latest news and updates about ANFIL programs and activities through our Facebook, X, LinkedIn, and TikTok pages. You can also subscribe to our YouTube and WhatsApp channels. Please follow the Election Observer podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you for joining us today. I'm your host, John Antiquera. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.